Ghostbusters?
Ghostbusters.
Welcome to the second episode of the Rewind Classic Movies podcast about 80s and 90s movies we probably saw as kids, even if we weren't old enough to fully understand the adult themes. I'm GB, and with me is my co-host, AJ.
Hi, I am indeed AJ, and this week we are going to be watching Ghostbusters. It's science versus spooks in the ultimate showdown, proving that sometimes the real magic of the supernatural is teamwork, tech, and a catchy theme song. Who you gonna call?
It's really good. Directed by Ivan Reitman and released in 1984, it was made for $30 million, a number that Reitman completely pulled out of his arse when asked by the studio. And it went on to make almost $300 million at the box office. It was the fifth film for Reitman, who had just come off the back of the success of Meatballs and Stripes, which both starred Ghostbusters. They had 12 months to complete it when they agreed the budget with the studio and didn't even have a finished script. It was nominated for 2 Academy Awards and 3 Golden Globes, and it didn't win any of them. It did win a BAFTA for Best Original Song for Ray Parker Jr.'s classic song of the same name. Go on, AJ, gives a bit.
Dun, da, 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 da.
That'll do. In the last episode, we chatted about Blade Runner. You loved it. I hated it. Surely there's no way either of us doesn't love Ghostbusters.
Well, I'll find out. We'll talk about it. Let's talk about it. Why I might not love it. I know. We'll get there. I remember I have fond memories of watching this over and over again at boarding school. In our common room upstairs, we had about 5 or 6 different VHS classics. One of them was, what's that one without batteries? Batteries not included. I think Raiders Against the Lost Ark.
Against
Ghostbusters.
the Lost Ark.
Raiders Against the Lost Ark, yes. Rage Against the Lost Ark. And one of them was Ghostbusters. I haven't seen it in years, a long, long time. And it was really funny revisiting it all again, sort of having patchy memory about it and watching it all over again. What about you? What's your history with it?
Well, I've seen this so much that I toyed with not watching it again for this specifically, which I always want to do. Mm-hmm. But it ended up not only watching it, but watching it again with the commentary, which I've already seen before. It wasn't new to me, but God, I bloody love this movie. I mean, when I was a kid, I had the toys, I had the Firehouse, watched the cartoons, never had the Proton Pack. Or the Trap, which is what I really wanted. The Trap is the coolest thing in the world to me. Had the Ghostbusters game on a Commodore 64, which was very hard and not very fun. I think I owned it on every media possible over the years, VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, now on digital. And this is the film that made me want to have a Twinkie. I didn't even know what it was when I was younger. You couldn't get them in the UK. And I ended up going to America, and one of the first things I did was sort of try and find a Twinkie in a 7-Eleven. And I'll tell you what, it's disappointing.
They are, aren't they?
Just bland.
They're awful.
And then one of the greatest things in my life, which you can see on my YouTube channel, is when I went to New York.
What's the YouTube channel called?
Do you know what? I don't know. Just Google Gareth Bartlett YouTube. I went to New York last year, and while all my colleagues that I was with went drinking in swanky wine bars, I was like, I'm just going to go down to the Ghostbusters Firehouse. And I got there, and there may have been a tear, and then I couldn't drag myself away. It was so surreal.
Were there lots of people there? Was it quite a touristy place? No.
I mean, I was the only one who was there deliberately. Other people walked past it and went, oh, it's Ghostbusters. Right, let's talk about how this movie came to be. Dan Aykroyd's family all believed in ghosts. His dad wrote a book about it. His mother said she saw ghosts. His grandfather experimented with radios to contact the dead. And his great-grandfather was a renowned spiritualist.
It was going to happen, wasn't it? It was going to happen.
Yeah.
I didn't realise his dad wrote a book about it. That's interesting. And I don't know when he first had the idea, actually, whether he wanted it to be a comedy or not.
Yeah, I mean, so originally it was John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd were meant to do it with Eddie Murphy. So Aykroyd had quite a fully fleshed out script, but it was more focused on the underworld, and they were traveling through time and space fighting monsters. I think they called it Ghost Mashers or something. It was far more magical. And then Ivan Reitman suggested bringing in Harold Ramis to help write it. Then John Belushi died and all that before it got going. But they actually based Slimer on John Belushi, the sort of larger, overindulgent Slimer.
They wanted to call it Ghostbusters, but Ghostbusters was owned by Universal. They owned the rights to it because of some small kids program or something like that.
That's right. Kids animated TV show.
That's the one, and they came up with these other names for it. They tabled Ghost Stoppers, Ghost Breakers, and Ghost Smashers, which would have been crap. And it's great that they bought the rights off Universal in the end, and were able to call it Ghostbusters.
£500,000, I think, if I remember rightly.
There was something about the fact that they were going to pay Universal had the film made a profit, but due to the weird way that they inflate budgets, they managed to not make a profit at all, and therefore never actually had to pay Universal for the rights to the name, which is hilarious.
Outrageous, but you'd do it if you could.
I was reading that Bill Murray had a thing that he never used to commit to a film until really, really late. And they were never really sure if he was going to join or not, because he was like, yeah, that sounds like a load of fun, but he never really committed to it for ages. So they had like loads of backup people that, they would have offered it to had Bill Murray didn't commit. I mean, he was integral to the whole scene. The whole film was written for him, but they had Michael Keaton, Chevy Chase, Tom Hanks, Robin Williams, Steve Guttenberg, all these people lined up. And interestingly, the guy that played the professor in Back to the Future.
Christopher Lloyd,
that's the one. Yeah, that was going to be him instead of Spangler.
And that would have been before Back to the Future. I just want to talk about the start of the movie. From that very first synth, or whatever instrument that is, over the Columbia logo, I'm drawn in, and it's creeping me out. Then the big orchestra swells over that concrete line outside the New York Public Library.
Yeah.
And then we go to the librarian walking downstairs, which is really a library in LA, not New York. And then the books start floating about, which was books on fishing wire. And the cards start flying, which was people blowing through copper tubing. Then she runs and ends up screaming at something that we don't see, and it's all just terrifying. Then we go into that Ray Parker theme tune, and it's such a contrast. It shouldn't work, but it does. And then we cut to Bill Murray doing his fake psychic tests as a way to pick up women. I mean, what an opening to a movie.
It is great. It is great. It starts out and you don't really know, actually, is it going to be a comedy? Because it starts out kind of seriously. It's like, is this going to be a full-on horror movie? And then the theme tune is like, this isn't very serious at all, is it?
You talk about whether it's going to be a comedy or not, and I've always thought this, and it was clarified for me when they did the all-female Ghostbusters, right? And it wasn't the cast of that didn't make the movie good. It just clarified to me that Ghostbusters, it's not a comedy. It's just a movie that's fucking funny. It's not quick gags, and it's not comedians trying to be funny. They are just funny. But it's not written as gags to me. It's filmed in like a documentary style where the actors fully portray these characters who, through what's going on, have funny exchanges. No one's there going, ba-dum-bum.
You're right. I've not thought of it like that. It's very true. I mean, they're obviously all comedians, but it's not like that at all. I like the way you say that it's a bit like a documentary or a fly on the wall kind of thing. It is a little bit, in a way, where they're sort of following them around. But I mean, it is hilarious. And all of the one-liners, or, when Spengler does Egon does all the deadpan stuff, like, I collect spores, mold, and fungus.
Mold and fungus.
Such a great line, isn't it?
There's so many quotable lines from this movie, and so many that have come back in the later movies because they're so memorable. But you write them down or you look at them on paper, and they're not memorable lines.
Listen,
but it's the delivery.
Do you smell something? I love that. It's my favourite line in the whole movie. Listen.
Really?
Because it's because it's so silly. It's so silly. He comes in and is like, listen. Do you smell something? It's because it's so ridiculous, but it's just great.
It's so subtle as well, though.
It is.
And we'll come on to memorable lines later, because we could do that for an hour.
We could,
but let's not. Let's talk quickly about the casting, the acting, and the directing. Dan Aykroyd described the three main characters as like the Tin Man, the Lion, and the Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz. Ray the Heart, Egon the Brains, and Peter the Mouth. And Dan Aykroyd wanted them to have like a boss, like a Ghostbusters boss, but Harold Ramis disagreed. But I think what makes this movie great is these three guys just look normal. They behave normal. They're believable characters. I mean, look at their haircuts. These guys are not Hollywood polished. These are like entirely believable. And this is where it plays in for me into this sort of documentary style. There's no one there is looking like a movie star.
It's very true. I mean, they are, disgraced college professors that have just lost their jobs at the, at the university. Bill Murray looks like he's a recovering alcoholic. He looks well rough, basically. I mean, they do. I mean, he looks quite pallid. I'm not going to lie. They're not action heroes. I mean, even back in the 80s, most action heroes weren't all that polished, but they're not big guys. They're not, they're not muscular and tall and kick ass at all. They're just scientists that are, doing their thing.
And then we've got Ernie Hudson.
Yeah.
This guy, on some versions, he didn't even get anywhere near the billing.
Yeah, this is the thing. I don't remember a fourth Ghostbuster, right?
Oh,
at all.
what?
And this is the thing, and I don't. And it was only when he joined them, and I was like, oh, there's 4 of them. I do remember, but you only remember the 3. It's like, I don't know, 3 Musketeers, but you know the 3 Ghostbusters. You can name them. Everyone can do that. And then you suddenly go, oh, yeah, there's the 4th one. And he had some great lines. And he brought everything down to the man on the street, you and I. He brought that. He's not a scientist. He doesn't know what's going on. He's just there for the job, for the paycheck. They're so desperate. They're so busy. They're so overworked. They need an extra person. And this guy's just turned up and answered an ad in the paper. And off we go.
If there's a steady paycheck, I'll believe anything you want.
Right? And that's the thing,
Great. I mean, there's so many gags that wouldn't happen without his character. But
very true.
I feel sorry for Ernie Hudson because he's not even in the making of. Sega brought a game out a couple of years later. He wasn't even in it. I mean, and he's not in the movie late. He's not like a third act addition, is he? He comes in relatively early on.
He does. He's got some big parts. He's driving around in the car with them all. He's on the roof. I mean, he's doing the thing.
And that scene when he's in the car with Dan Aykroyd and it's night and they're driving over the bridge and they're talking about the religious quote and the end of the world.
Yeah.
That scene sells so much of the movie for me.
Yeah.
But talking about the bridge, talking about the city, New York City for me is one of the top characters in this movie. It is a character in itself.
In this particular film, it is frightening, and the scale of it all. And you can really see the daily grind of New York. And you see the cops doing their thing. You see the people on the street, the everyday people doing their thing in New York. It just looks like a busy old place. It does. It has got lots of character in the film.
When you see that montage of them running around after they just sort of set up business, I think that was one of the first things they shot, if not the first thing they shot. It was like a wardrobe test. It wasn't much more than that.
No way.
So I think they took some chances with permits and stuff and just put them out there and filmed it. So it is literally people going, who are these guys? As they're
What's
walking
going
past.
on? Yeah. Excellent.
Now, how do you feel about Rick Moranis? Because for me, he's the one character that never really seems to fit. He's almost just too oddball.
I know what you mean. And I really like him. I like him as an actor anyway. I like him in all the films he's done. I mean, I love him in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which is, I think, a film we ought to visit because that's a great film. And, Little Shop of Horrors. He's a great comic person. I know what you mean about his role not really fitting, but I think it works. They originally had tabled John Candy as an actor who was going to play some German guy who had dogs or something, I read, which would have been nuts. And, John Candy was another big name of that era, comic guy.
He worked with Ivan Reitman on Stripes.
Ah, yeah, of course. I love the scene where he's having his clients over for a dinner party. And apparently it was mostly all ad-libbed. And he's running around as this sort of accountant guy. And he's like, I managed to get this. Hey, I hope you like the salmon. It's usually $24.99, but I managed to get it for $11.49, and I'm going to write it off as a tax deductible. And that's why I'm having all of my clients over, so I can write it off as a tax deductible. And
then he's exposing all his clients and what they do and how they're saving money. And
oh, God, it's brilliant. I love it. And that scene is great. And I love the other bit where he's always getting locked out of his house. He's obviously a creep for Sigourney Weaver. And he's constantly going back and every time he's getting locked out of his house. And I quite like that. It's the same repeating gag, but I think it's quite funny. I think it's quite endearing. Yeah. But he does feel lost in the film. It does seem like, why is his character there? But I think it develops as the film goes on.
He's the standout one for me who seems like somebody who's playing a role in the movie. But he does, the genius of Rick Moranis is he makes it work. And then we come on to William Atherton, who is Walter Peck.
He
Now, this
always
guy
gets such a bad rep in films.
Oh, the poor guy. I mean, he's so
You
good
know?
at his job. I mean, he's genuinely irritating and hateful without having to be any kind of supervillain. He's just a normal bloke doing his job. But what a prick. I mean, he's just a rude bloke who's just a classic power-mad employee.
Dickless over here.
Now, that's one of my favourite lines in the movie. I mean, and he plays basically the same role in Die Hard.
Yeah, exactly. In Die Hard 1 and Die Hard 2, when he's on the plane.
He makes the movie work, though.
But he plays the exact same character. It's the exact same character.
Yeah.
You know?
But like, you obviously can't have a big bad too soon in the movie. So he fills that role perfectly as a kind of adversary to the Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And he's great.
He is.
I think that the thing that makes this movie work for me is the balance of the cast. You've got the wacky guys in Murray, Ramis, Aykroyd, and Moranis. And then you've kind of got the real straight ones of like Sigourney Weaver, Annie Potts, William Atherton, and Ernie Hudson. So it does bounce off quite a bit.
Yeah.
Which is nice. But I think a lot of it was improv around a kind of core script. Bill Murray, when he's in the library and he's trying to get the sample and he's like flicking it about and he's like, and it like gets in his eye. That clearly to me looks so improv and accidental. But it's one of the funniest things.
I thought the exact same thing. I don't know what it is they made or whatever it is. He's just like, and he's genuinely disgusted about it. And then he's just wiping on the books and then just like on all the bits of paper going. He gets someone to shoe and he like kicks the bookcase and it's just it's great. He's funny. He's funny.
It doesn't look like they've blocked it. It doesn't look like they've gone in any way. Let's practice what you're going to do. He just did something that's how it looks anyway, because it seems so real.
And it works. It works so well. It works so well. I loved the receptionist whose name I don't know.
Annie Potts.
Annie Potts, thank you. I know you've done your research.
I've watched the movie for the last 30-something years, so that helps.
I love that kind of voice. She's got that kind of... I love that. I think it's great. And she's in, I think, number 2 as well.
Yes, radically different because of the cartoon. She becomes a bit more of a comic character vibe. Okay, let's move on to the visuals, the VFX, and all that kind of shenanigans. First thing I want to talk about here is Laszlo Kovacs, the cinematographer. This guy is responsible for making this film look incredible. He was missing from Ghostbusters 2, which doesn't look anywhere near as good. I mean, that looks like a movie. This looks like a documentary.
It is documentary style, and I know that they were running around with Steadicams a lot, and Steadicam being a brand new, well, not brand new, but it was very new. That suddenly you can have this camera and run with it, you know, and you've got all the stabilization, and I think they just went nuts with it. So the camera is really following the action. It's no longer on tripods locked off. Okay, shoot, go. It's this camera can follow the action. Off we go, and you can really see it being used so much in the film. And I think that's what
this
gave
was
it
the
the
first time that
dynamics.
First time Ivan Reitman had used it.
Wow.
In this movie. And he said it allowed him to shoot wider, so we'd see the characters together and see their reactions to what each other did, without having to loads of individual cuts. So it kept the film moving. And what makes all this more impressive is not only are we shooting on film, but this was before they had video playback on set, apparently. So they couldn't even look back at what they just filmed. The guy that's pulling the focus, he's measured it with a tape, and you're hoping that they've got all that right and hope the blocking's right. And the scene where Dana is floating as Zool, they had to redo that because they noticed in the edit there was a crew guy just sat in the corner. and you're not going to see it until you see it back in the studio, you know, in the edit.
I thought the effects for that were actually great. I mean, it genuinely looked like she was levitating. They pulled it off really well. I was looking really closely for like signs of that or this or whatever. But it was great. It was really well done.
There's a quote from Ivan Reitman that said, "Virtually all the effects are analog and done live on set, which helped the actors as they had something real to play with and added humour to it." I mean, you've only got to look at the Star Wars prequels to realise what a bad idea it is to have everything completely green screen or additional effects done afterwards. And one of the best examples for this, to me, was the eggs on the counter. You know, when they're in Dana's apartment and she's about to get zooled and she's taking the shopping out, putting the eggs on the counter, and they start cooking and exploding on the counter. They had a hot Teflon-coated counter with 2 propane burners underneath. And then they were like injecting air into the eggs from underneath, which was causing them to kind of pop and then cook. I mean, that's genius. Why don't we do more of that shit now?
Were they real eggs? Was that actually genuine? I did not.
Yeah.
I did wonder actually how they did that, and I never really looked it up. How they actually managed to do
And
that.
now you know.
That was actually
All
eggs
because
coming
you
out of
decided
there.
to do a podcast.
No way! I didn't realise they were actually cooking them on the counter. That's brilliant. It's so cool, isn't it?
I mean, generally the visual effects are excellent throughout the film. I think the streams from the proton packs look good, but not perfect.
And exactly.
Everything is helped by like real explosions and practical explosions and bits on set and lighting that helps sell it.
I love the proton pack streams. They're so cool because they're so nuts and out there, and all the purples and the yellows and the things and the stuff going everywhere, and like, and you can see the actors.
They could quite easily have done like a Star Wars lightsaber thing or something because it was kind of in vogue, but they went a bit wacky with it.
I think so. No, you're right. There's a bit where they're shooting. Well, we know him as Slimer now, but I think at the time he was called Onion Head Guy or something like that.
Or something, yeah.
Apparently modelled on John Belushi, which I thought was
yes, I said that at the beginning of the episode.
Well, yes, I missed that. Sorry. Edit that out if you like. And they're in the hotel corridor and they're shooting Slimer. And he grazes the wall. And if you pause it at the point where he's grazing the wall, you can actually see where the line continues and it's actually on fire.
Oh, really?
Yes. And it's fine because I specifically did that just to see, like, was that a thing? And obviously they set that up and then they drew it in afterwards, kind of things that follows. But if you pause it there, you can see where actually the line still continues and it's on fire, but the laser hasn't got that far yet. But obviously, I mean, I'm desperately looking for things like, oh, there it is. But don't look for things, and it's great. I think it's really, really well done. There's a part though where the trolley collides into the end of the hallway and hits the wall. Obviously, Slimer goes through the wall, trolley goes, and you see the wall wobble, and it's like, oh, that's a set. The trolley hits the wall. It's like, there's a little bit of wobble, but it's still funny. Like, who cares? It's great.
I'd not noticed these things. There's one bit of this movie that stands out as being the worst for visual effects, and I wonder if you've got the same one as me.
It's the dogs, right? It's those dogs, and the difference between when they're models or when they're moving. And I like it when he's on the bed and he gets the coats thrown on him and he's like, a bit disgruntled. And obviously when he bursts through the door of the flat and he's chasing him down the corridor or what have you into the elevator, and he bursts through the door, it's like that's obviously massive SFX is happening there, bash through the door kind of thing. And then he turns back and and then it's back to the model sitting on the floor. Like they just lifted him off the bed, put him on the floor, and he's looking, and it's just, it doesn't quite fit. It doesn't quite knit together.
It's when it goes to stop motion, it gets a bit janky.
Yeah.
Which is odd because there's been some great stop motion stuff up until this point in other movies. So I can only assume it came down to a budget thing and they had to rush those shots.
I guess so, because, I mean, you look at Slimer or you look at the other ghosts, and even the taxi cab guy, although that was probably not too difficult to film, but I don't think it was
stop motion. I think that they were optical effects. But you go to other stuff like, even in Star Wars, you've got things like the AT-ATs moving or whatever, and it's seamless.
Do you know how many times you go to Star Wars? That's like your base for everything. You like, I mean, if you look at Star Wars, if you look at every episode,
it's the thing I know the most.
It's the thing I know so little about as well.
And I wish it was just about films. It's not. It's the thing I know the most about in life.
The special effects guy, Richard Edlund.
Yep.
He was Industrial Light and Magic, which was Star Wars. This guy's got 4 Oscars behind him. He worked on The Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, E.T. He's done it all. Even the set designer, John LeCure, he won 3 Oscars for his previous work. They've got heavyweight people doing the set design, special effects, all of that sort of stuff. Huge Oscar-winning people. They've come on to a production that's been written by 3 comedians about ghosts, and it's going to be a comedy film. It's going to run around New York shooting stuff. Yeah, I'm in. Let's go. God, that takes some balls, I think, to say, yeah, let's do this.
This has got to be one of the greatest movies that can take the title of movie that shouldn't work but does. None of this should add up to be the movie it is. And this is a scary movie at times. Like when those terror dogs grab Sigourney Weaver in her chair, which was real grips under a trapdoor under the chair.
Yep.
And those lights from behind were really inspired by Steven Spielberg's lighting in Close Encounters.
Yeah.
And then the music plays a big part in making it scary and funny at times. You got those two notes. This is a scary movie at points.
It is.
That is the scariest scene in the movie for me.
Where she gets dragged into the kitchen.
Screaming away.
Yeah.
I think she's responsible for a lot of the genuine scary stuff in this movie. I mean, she just came off of Aliens.
Yep.
Aliens?
Aliens. Aliens? I don't know, actually, at this point.
But talking about that, the music and like the music has those scary two notes, and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got like Elmer Bernstein's dun 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 dun. Let's talk about music. That's where I'm going with this.
Let's. I see.
And I think if we're going to talk about music, we can't start anywhere else but Ray Parker Jr.
Today, for the first time, I actually listened to, and I don't think I've ever listened to it before. I Want a New Drug. I've Got a New Drug by Huey Lewis and the News, and it's basically the same song. I had no idea. It's literally listening to the Ghostbusters tune. I know Huey Lewis in the News was tied up with Back to the Future. I think he was wanted, not necessarily to write the theme tune, but to do a song, I think for one of the medley, one of the montages in the middle of the song or something like that. He couldn't commit to it. But he basically sued Ray Parker Jr. for saying like, well, that's basically my song that you've taken and turned into a pop song.
Even the intro. It's got that kind of like guitar-y bit that starts the song.
Yeah, I know. It's so mental.
This is one of those for me where unless you go into listening to the Huey Lewis song knowing that there were some legal issues, I don't know if anyone would listen to that Huey Lewis song and go, well, do you know what? This sounds like Ghostbusters.
I would.
Do you think?
I think so. I think if I'd listened to that...
I think you'd have to have an idea of a connective tissue first.
I don't know, because it's got that...
But what the song?
Yeah, it's got that descending thing.
Getting away from the legal side of it for a second, I think the Ray Parker Jr. song adds so much to the success of this movie. If you take that song away and you're just left with the rest of the soundtrack, as good as it is, it doesn't have that massive, memorable pop culture.
I ain't afraid of no ghost. It's true.
I mean, it's such a massive song.
It carried the film.
But Elmer Bernstein, the stuff he did for the movie was so good and kind of so varied. And he was pissed that they replaced a lot of his score with pop music.
Oh, really?
I don't think he was aware what they were going to do with it.
No, I was just thinking he contributed so much to it being scary in places. You know, the music is very dark and very scary in places.
And then at the same time, you've got the flip side of it being anything but, and it's all that dun 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 dun, and it's light and it's kooky. And I was listening to a couple of the songs from the soundtrack. This will be too much information for you. In the shower this morning while I was naked.
Why did you have to? Well, obviously you're naked in the shower. If you had your clothes on.
I just really wanted to put the image out there for you.
No, fair enough.
And I was listening to the Elmer stuff. And I sort of had this controversial thought that song, the that thing, that's called the main theme or something like that. What? How, can you imagine before editing this movie, Elmer Bernstein sends over his main theme and that's it? It did make me wonder, did they plan to have Ray Parker Jr. or did they say to Elmer Bernstein, we want a main theme for you, and that's what he came up with? I mean, I love it. I don't know if you'd asked me 20 years ago, what do I think of Elmer Bernstein's soundtrack for this? I don't know if I would have told you it was amazing. But when it came to watching the new movies, so Afterlife and Frozen Empire, you get bits of Elmer Bernstein's score come up in those. And it's in those moments where you have that moment of nostalgia and you think, God, that's just Ghostbusters. It's perfect.
Yeah. For me, I love the bit where and I think they use the song twice in the film, where they're running out the library because the ghost is just, the lady who's shh has just, changed into this mental at them, and they're like, oh my God, and the guys and they're running out, and this is the scary bit. But actually, there's this kind of, I don't know, the music that they play as they're running down the steps is this kind of piano rock and roll thing that's going on. And I love it. That's it. That's the one. And it's great. It's like, where are we going with this? And I think they play it again as well when they get their first call
Yes.
And they're going down the fireman's pole and all that sort of stuff. I think they play the same soundtrack, and it's just like, hey, this is
I think
great.
it's called Cleaning Up the Town.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's not a song that you think would work, is it really? But that soundtrack album is bloody weird. I mean, what have you listened to the whole album?
I haven't.
There's a weird mix of genres and stuff on there that should have no place sitting together. And the song that plays after the firehouse explosion is called Magic, and it's weird. Please, you know that bit?
I do. I really don't like it. It makes me feel awkward. That
If
part.
you ever listen to the full version of that song, it's a very average, normal song that wouldn't stand out, except for that one, it's almost like a middle eight section. It's so different from the rest of the song. I don't know how it got in there. It's not representative of that song whatsoever. There we are. It's a weirdly eclectic soundtrack album. The power of music for me, the one of my favourite scenes in this whole movie is what I call the "We Got One" scene. You know, until this point, they're down on their luck. They're eating the Chinese food with the last of their money.
Yeah,
then the call comes. Janine shouts. She hits the bell. The music kicks in. And it's just such a great feeling. You know, then we get the Ecto 1 reveal and the car looks badass. And oh man, what a great combination of visuals and music.
It's true. They've suddenly gone from not down and out, but they're down on their luck. This clearly hasn't worked out. We've spent all our money. We've got 3 mortgages. Everyone's got 3 mortgages these days. And
the way Venkman just goes in and remortgages his house, without any, doesn't give a shit. You didn't even try and bargain with him.
Spengler says something like, the interest of the compound interest alone is going to be 950,000 after 3 months or something mental, And they're eating their last. I need to withdraw some petty cash. Like this is the petty cash, and you're feeling really sorry for them. It hasn't worked out, and then this big call comes in, and they get their suits on, and they go into the hotel, and they're dressed to the nines. That's when you see them in their boiler suits, the names, the proton packs. The 3 of them walk in, and it's like boom. Ghostbusters, we're here. It's great.
That for me, we've both played in bands for years. That scene for me that you just described is kind of what being in a band is like for me. You walk into a venue, you don't know anyone, there's some drunk people, it's all quite intimidating, but the 3 or 4 of you are together and you're going to kick some ass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ghostbusters is a band. That's what it is.
It is, isn't it?
Now, before we move on, there's one last bit about music I want to talk about.
Okay.
Have you heard the remix of the Ray Parker Jr. song that's simply called Bustin'?
No, I'm not aware of that at all.
I mean, we haven't even touched on the line "Bustin' makes me feel good," but I feel like we should probably skip over it. But anyway,
is that actually
someone "Bustin' makes me feel good"? You know it is.
I don't know it at all. I
mean, it makes you rethink the whole song. Someone has done a remix of the song. So they've taken the stems, right, and they've recut it into different orders and different layouts, and they've moved the words around. And I'll tell you now, it is genius. This thing was uploaded 9 years ago, and it's got 18 million views. And it is just an infectious remix. But they've done clever things with the lyrics, such as "sleeping makes me feel good," and things like that, and just played around with all the words. It's very clever. If you or anyone listening to this has not checked out Bustin', go and listen to it because it's jolly good fun. Now, we're going to move on to the section titled Things I Want to Talk About.
Oh, okay. Go on.
I will touch more on this in my Fast Forward podcast next week. However, I want to talk briefly about the Reitmans. So Ivan Reitman directed this, and his son Jason, who had a little cameo appearance in Ghostbusters 2, took over the reins recently when he directed the new versions of these, Afterlife and Frozen Empire. Those movies, I've watched them many times and they make me cry because they are brilliant. If you haven't seen them, watch them.
I've not seen them.
So Jason Reitman basically directed Afterlife with his dad. They sort of directed it together. And then Ivan Reitman died and Jason Reitman wrote the following movie and got his friend Gil Keenan to direct it. And they are both wonderful.
Quite lovely.
And they both continue the story. So I think the Reitmans are a great thing for Ghostbusters. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing is what I've kind of touched on already, and we don't necessarily need to go into it anymore, but this works because it's not shot as a comedy. That's so key to how they approach this movie, is they let the actors do the work, but they're not going gag, gag, gag. How can we get a quick gag in? Which is how the 2016 version came across to me.
2016, is that the one with the ladies?
That was the ladies one.
I've not.
Which
seen that, or if I have completely forgotten it.
I've no problem with it being, the gender's reversed.
Oh,
Great
absolutely
idea. Let's
fine.
try
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And do you know what? The visuals in that movie, they weren't in the same world as this stuff. They were far more like the video game and out there and a bit more neon. And it was brilliant. I think the visuals were one of the best things about the movie. It didn't work because it wasn't particularly enjoyable and it was just all a bit silly. It was someone saying, "Oh, Ghostbusters, that was a comedy. Let's write a comedy Ghostbusters."
Right.
With four very funny women. Just didn't work.
But it was
Anyway,
a comedy.
the last thing.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to talk about is the fridge. Why is Zool in the fridge?
Is that just a genuine question, or have you
I've got no answer to it.
No, fair enough.
It's one of those things where I've watched this film hundreds of times and never have I thought to myself, why is Zool in the fridge? But it's a bit of an odd place for a big bad to hide out, really.
I just think it's funny. Why not the fridge? I mean, in a way, the oven makes more sense, doesn't it? Because it's hot.
And it does give you the whole, oh my God, what a load of junk food.
Exactly. Yeah, you eat this? I know, exactly. It sets up that line beautifully.
All right, over to you. Whatever you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
So there's a line where they don't want to talk, they don't want to cross the line, cross the streams. And it's like, don't cross the streams. And he says, why not? It's like total protonic reversal. And so I was watching this film just now, and so for those of you that don't know, my wife is a German scientist, and
I know this about your wife, but I've never heard you describe her as such. And without knowing, if you don't know what your wife is like, that sounds quite intimidating.
It is. Oh, she's a very intimidating lady. I love it a bit, but it's very intimidating. And I wrote down what she said. And she said, well, that's implying they're creating antimatter, destroying matter. Great. Apparently a lot of people have written a lot of things about total protonic reversal. There's this whole fan club and there's whole discussions on scientific forums where people have sort of gone and talked about what that could possibly mean, or what that could do, or what, if these packs and these things and all these bits and pieces have got, if you did cross these streams, actually what would happen. And people have, gone out there and created this this discussion about it. It's huge.
That just says so much about the way they wrote this movie to me. Like, Aykroyd was like a paranormal nut, and Harold Ramis was apparently up there with him. Like, he was his equal. Aykroyd was impressed with a lot of stuff he knew and put in the script. And it sounds like they had the science stuff down as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's carried so much throughout the years as well, is because, the script was so well written. It was so masterfully, funnily done.
But also, they never bother to waste the audience's time with, oh, okay, so we're going to invent this thing called a proton pack, and this is how it works, and we're going to do this. They just go, oh, we've made this thing. We haven't tested it. Fucking hell, this is dangerous.
What is this? It's like we got these nuclear packs, and they're standing in the elevator, right? They're looking at the three of them standing together in the elevator. And it's like, the first time they're doing this, they've got these packs on. No one really knows what they're doing. They've got the night vision goggles and all the crap on their head and everything. But where did they get all this stuff? And where did they make it? And
I know.
And they just sort of turn up. And then I love the drawer that comes out of the car with it all just like stacked in there. It's great. I love that.
But the subtleties of that scene, I mean, in the elevator that you're talking about, I mean, that is a tripod shot, right? It's just locked off, and it's three blokes within about 3 feet of each other in one tiny elevator. And the stuff they make from that, I mean, when he turns it on, you get that brilliant sound effect of the thing powering up. And then just, is it Egon and Venkman just have that subtle kind of like slight move away. Like, they've just turned on a nuclear accelerator. If something goes
like
wrong,
that's going to save you. I know.
It's so good.
There's a scene I love and they've gone to prison. William Atherton has come and shut them down. They've turned off the power, and they've this guy's really a dick. He's really got no dick.
You've just absolutely slaughtered that scene.
Well, you can cut that bit out. We'll cut that out. Look. One of my favourite scenes is when they're in prison.
Well, I've literally got a section that says favourite scenes.
Oh, for fuck's sake! This is the thing.
We're going to come on to that. Do you want to talk about anything else in the movie other than your favourite scene?
Oh God! Well, lots. But but then you
talk about anything but your favourite scene.
Well, it's not my favourite scene. It's not my favourite scene. It's a particular scene I like, but I'll do that. I'll do that on my favourite scene. Then I'll do that on my favourite scene. Is there anything else I need to? What else do I want to talk about in the film? There's probably lots, but I've forgotten.
But I'll fill by telling people that we were going to film this over a week ago and you were busy. And so neither of us has actually bothered to watch the film or look at our notes in the weeks, and now we don't know what we're talking about.
But the most ironic thing is, in the week between when we were going to film this and when we were going to film this, Gareth came to within half an hour of where I live. We live 2,000 miles apart in two different countries, right? 2,500 miles apart, two different countries. And Gareth was half an hour down the road from me filming really fast boats, which was hilarious.
I was in the same city.
But we didn't get to meet up because we're so busy. But there you go.
We see enough of each other.
We do.
Once a year. Right, should we move on to... Oh, no, you've done some research and you know what you want to talk about.
Spengler, here's a bit of trivia for you. The name Spengler comes from an Oswald Spengler, who was a German polymath and historian, which I thought was quite cool.
Do you want to explain what a polymath is?
A polymath. Well, it comes from the Greek poly, meaning very or a lot of or many, and a math, if you're mathemata, which is learning or learned. So if you are a polymath, you are very learned. So it's,
God, I think we're out of time. So this is what you chose to talk about.
I mean, what do you want? We don't have to do this, Do you know what? Do you know what, mate? I've got better things to do. I'm tired. It's 10:30 for me. I mean, you said, let's do a podcast. I'm doing a podcast. I'm doing my best here, mate.
And you end up telling me about a polymath. Go on, you're Spengler.
No, that's it. He was named after Oswald Spengler, who was a polymath. And I really like the fact that Harold Ramis wanted to name him after this polymath, who is, this scientist, this historian who's a very learned gentleman, because his character was this deadpan scientist. He was a deadpan, so he named him after another deadpan German. I thought that was great. I thought that was just quite a little thing, but you fucking ruin it.
But they put so much thought into the characters. Like, their characters are so defined.
Yes.
Almost, I don't want to say almost comically so, because it is comical. But, you literally have the nerd, the womanizer, the kind of the paranormal guy. Like, it's so beautifully boundaried.
It's great.
And that kind of research that you just talked about clearly shows how much time and effort they put into defining that.
Absolutely.
Even though you don't know. We don't know.
No.
One of the things I always do whenever I walk into a room with a piano is I do those two notes. Ding, ling, ling. They hate that.
Do you seriously?
I can't resist it. I just have to do it.
They hate that, They hate that.
Brilliant. And he's walking around the room squeezing his little...
That's the thing, and I love the props. I love the way they've made all these things. Because the trap, I was watching it and I paused it on the trap because I wanted to get a good close up because I had the trap, and I love that you can see that it has been so. I don't want to say bodged together because that's wrong, but I think that the look they wanted was slightly rushed, put together stuff, slightly bodged, but looking vaguely scientific. And what they've got is they've got two heat sinks. And they've put a heat sink on the side, and then they've put a smaller heat sink on that heat sink on this metal box. And it's just great, actually. It's just like they've just found two heat sinks like down at your local supply shop and just stuffed them on the side of this metal box. That makes it look good. I love that.
Time to pick your favourite scene.
Oh, there's so many. But there's one particular scene. There's one particular scene that I think is probably my favourite. They're in jail. And they've been put in jail by William Atherton, who's come around and told them to switch it all off, and all the ghosts have escaped, and it's all going nuts. And he tells the cop, "You can shoot them if they say that again." And the cop tells him, "You do your job." Anyway, they end up in jail, and they're all in jail. And they've got these blueprints, right? They've got the blueprints for the building. Like, where the fuck do they get these blueprints from? In fact, two different sheets of blueprints they're looking at. Then Dan Aykroyd is looking at, and then they built these columns, and they've got these, and you've got all the inmates in there, right? All these retrobates, and they're all gathering around them, sitting down like they're really interested in it as well. Not like they're going to knife them, but they seem to be sort of gathering around them like, oh yeah, this is really interesting what these guys are talking about. I think it's great. And it's just such a weird scene, but I really like it.
Brilliant. That's your favourite scene. That's what you're putting down as your favourite scene.
That's what I'm putting down as my favourite scene.
For me, it's either the We Got One scene that we talked about earlier, or just the whole opening with those three guys down there and the library ghost, gather. Just... It's fucking brilliant. The way he pulls him back by his ear I mean, you wouldn't get a scene like that now. The pacing of it and just the adventure of it. It's just wonderful. It's a perfect scene for me. There's nothing you can do in that scene to improve it, let alone that amazing effect of the ghost.
That was so good, though.
Amazing. Now we're going to move on to favourite memorable lines. All right. There are a lot of memorable catchphrases in this movie that I don't think were written with any intention of being catchphrases. They're just memorable for their delivery. So it would be too easy for us just to say great lines, and we could do this for hours, and we've done it for long enough as it is already. So I thought, let's do this in the form of a quiz.
Okay.
Okay? In which I will ask you questions, or I will tell you some of the scenes, and you have to try and finish them off. Okay? Good.
Okay.
First one. Venkman. Are you, Alice, menstruating at the moment? Library guy says, what's that got to do with it? And Venkman says,
back off. I'm a scientist.
yes. Excellent.
Because I've also written that down as one of the lines I really like.
I mean, first of all, are you, Alice, menstruating at the moment? I mean,
I know.
just wonderful. And look at, it's not like she's a younger woman. I mean,
I know. That's the thing. That's the thing that got me as well. It's like, oh my God, really? You're asking this lady that's clearly been through the menopause if she's menstruating, for God's sake.
Next one. And this is one of my favourite lines because this is sort of humour I appreciate. Dana says, that's the bedroom, but nothing ever happened in there. And Venkman says,
what a crime. It is great. Because I think at that moment it really sums up how much of a womanizing creep he is at the end of the day.
Another line that's not a quiz is just Janine, I've quit better jobs than this. And then just goes into, Ghostbusters, what do you want?
I know, it's great.
Talk about people that like hate their jobs. Oh, man. I'm going to quiz you on this one.
Go on.
Dana stroke Zool says, I want you inside me. To which Venkman replies,
it's like, sounds like you've got two people in there already. It's pretty busy already or something.
Yeah.
Because I've written
sounds
it down
like you've
as
got
one
at
of my
least two
favourite
people
lines.
in there already.
That's it. I love that. I love that line.
As a kid, we used to say this all the time. If someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
Yes.
I mean, what a line that is.
I know.
But my favourite line in the whole movie is where Ray Stant says, everything was fine with our system until the power grid was shut off by dickless here. And Peck says, they caused an explosion. And the mayor says, is this true? And Venkman, just so deadpan, goes, yes, this man has no dick. And it's, oh, I'm going to miss him. I'm going to get him a nice fruit basket. I mean,
I know,
that's
right?
my favourite thing. Let alone when they do the whole, dogs and cats living together.
Total carnage. Yeah.
I'm going to apologise to all our American listeners, of which we don't know there are any, for my American accent. But I can't help it. Honourable mentions for me are Get Her. Of course, we came, we saw, we kicked its ass. And something that I used to say all the time as a kid, and I still say now, Mother Puss Bucket.
Really?
Oh, I love that line.
It's great.
I just can't. I'll go.
Isn't that when he's seen the Stay Tuft Marshmallow Man walking?
Stay Tuft.
Is it Stay Tuft?
Do you know, we talked about doing T-shirts, right, for this, custom T-shirts that people can buy. I quite like the idea of doing your slightly wrong quotes. The Stay Tuft Marshmallow Man instead of the Stay Puffed. That's quite a good one.
It's
just a marshmallow man with big hair.
Everyone can see how much more invested in this you are than I am. Or maybe how much more of a nerd you are than I am. Or I mean, we're both really
how much more
into
sad
it.
I am.
We're both, but there's just you put so much more effort into this than I do. Yeah.
But yeah, Mother Puss Bucket is my go-to. If ever I need to swear, and then I realise
you can't.
There's probably someone young or someone that I can't swear in front of.
Yeah,
I say Puss Bucket.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to move on to trivia and deleted scenes.
We're moving past favourite lines, are we?
Yes, you did exceptionally well, I thought.
No, that's fine.
Feel free to add your own. I know you had some written down.
No, it was just because there are so many lines in this, but there's what I love specifically is some of the technical things that they've just clearly just made up a load of crap. And there's one particular bit where they're in the library and they're walking around with their little tricorders or I don't know, whatever you call them. And he's just like, this is hot, Ray. And he says, symmetrical book stacking. just like the Philadelphia mass turbulence of 1947. I just love little things like that,
Because no humans would stack books like this.
That's it, and then one of my all-time favorite lines, which you just can't get away with now, is when he's leaning over the desk and he says, "I've seen shit that will turn you white."
That's great.
Oh my God, it's brilliant. I love it.
But the thing is, you say you can't say that now, but from the reaction of the people in the room at the time, it looks like you couldn't say it then. I mean, it looked edgy. Right, trivia. The Dan Aykroyd, I'm just going to call it sex scene.
Yes.
It's so brief, and I don't know if I ever really understood it as a kid, but the ghost that is performing the sex act is Playboy playmate Kimberly Herron, who was also in Romancing the Stone and ZZ Top's music video for Legs.
No way.
She died in 2022.
That's sad. That's interesting. I know that it was going to be, that sex scene was going to be part of a bigger scene that I think they cut or it just didn't work or something like that, but they put it into that montage.
Amazing. Do you know US singer Debbie Gibson?
I don't.
Our mutual friend Brett Steptoe, who people can hear on the podcast, Damn, That's What I Call Good Music, about music, classic albums, a bit like we do classic movies. He's a big fan of Debbie Gibson. Anyway, I digress. She was in the Tavern on the Green scene where Lewis Tully's running around like a madman trying to run away from the dog. She was in that scene before she was famous. She was just 13. And then she went on to have quite significant hits stateside. I wonder if you know this one, though, another cameo. During the firehouse explosion, when everyone's gathered around looking at all the ghosts come out and everything, is a Ronald Jeremy.
Well, Ron Jeremy, as in I'm hornier than Ron Jeremy. No way.
Yes, adult star Ron Jeremy.
Wow.
He's there. He's like behind a barrier looking at everything going on.
No way.
No,
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. I also did not know this. This I find quite fascinating and I want to know more about. What I'm about to tell you, I think, came from Wikipedia.
We're going quite deep now.
In the early 1980s, Tom Mankiewicz wrote a script for a film called The Batman, with Ivan Reitman attached to direct.
Okay.
He planned to cast Meatballs star Bill Murray as Batman.
Oh my
David Niven
God.
as Alfred Pennyworth, William Holden as Commissioner James Gordon, and singer David Bowie as the Joker. Following the deaths of Holden and Niven and rewrites of the script, Reitman left the project and was replaced by Gremlins director Joe Dante, but the film was never made. Can you imagine that? Bill Murray as Batman.
I cannot.
David Niven as Alfred.
I can imagine David Niven as an Alfred. He'd make a brilliant Alfred. I mean, absolutely brilliant. And David Bowie as Joker.
As the Joker.
Oh, as long as he sang, he'd have to sing. I mean, he would have to sing, but he would be a brilliant Joker.
So, I mean, this is early 80s, so this is like almost 10 years before.
But I cannot, for the love of me, imagine Bill Murray being Batman. I could see Bill Murray being like, I don't know, the Riddler or even maybe the Joker, but not Batman.
If this was early 1980s, you're basically looking at how he is in Ghostbusters, which, as you described him earlier, which I'm sure he will absolutely love, he looked a bit like an alcoholic.
Yeah. Yes, it's true.
Not your classic Batman look.
No. God.
That blows my mind. In terms of some deleted scenes, there's a really terrible one, which is just two newlyweds in a hotel room. And it would have been completely out of place in the movie. It doesn't really do anything apart from that they sort of see a ghost or they see something horrible that we can't see. It's a crap scene. But anyway, it does include the brilliant line of the woman saying to her new husband, "Aren't you so glad we waited?" And the guy, I mean, they're both probably about 40 by this point. The guy just says, "I don't know, it probably would have been the same." Which is just the most tragic sort of honeymoon love line. Oh my God. But apart from that, it's crap. Then there's the homeless guys scene in which it's Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd as homeless guys who bump into Lewis Tully running around. So it's during that time that he's running around from the terror dogs like a lunatic. And it just does this sort of odd comedy duo improv. Oh, we're two homeless people. Oh, look, it's actually the Ghostbusters. But wouldn't have worked. I can only assume like they maybe had a break in filming and didn't know what to do and they just sort of made it up on the spot because there's no way that was going in the movie.
oh yeah, let's just quickly film this. This could be quite funny, or just put this on camera, or put this on film, and oh, actually, yeah, it didn't work. Maybe something like that.
The last one that I've got here is it's the deleted scene right from the end of the movie. So they're on the rooftop covered in marshmallow, or everyone but Venkman is covered in marshmallow. And Louis Tully asked Dana, she said, Dana, did we? And she says, no, Louis, no, and walks off. I mean, it doesn't need to be done, but apparently Rick Moranis just came up with line after line of just absolute gold. And they just had to cut so much of it out, which is a shame. The way this movie ends with Ernie Hudson, covered in marshmallow. Yeah. I love this town. And then it kicks in. And that's basically the end of the movie, apart from the credits rolling over them coming out.
Yeah.
Which I assume is like a real life, thanks everybody, goodbye. I mean, it's a brilliant end to the movie, the way that Ernie's line hits with the music. Oh, just perfect. You've sort of alluded throughout this whole episode that you haven't committed to whether you love or hate or not fussed about this movie. So it's time to talk about our tier list rankings.
All right.
Last week, in our very first episode, you rated Blade Runner as an A.
I did.
After we established that S was kind of superior and not shit.
Yes.
You gave it A. I think I went for C.
You did.
Which was controversial.
It was.
So Ghostbusters then. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go on then.
Because I feel like it's not going to be a surprise. I'm going to go S rating for this. What? This for me, do you know what? Superior. This is different gravy for me. In the past, since Afterlife and Frozen Empire came out, it really cemented for me how much I love this movie and how I think this is as close to a perfect movie as I think you're ever going to get. It's not something like when you have conversations with people about what your favourite movies, I don't think I really ever say Ghostbusters. I'll say Star Wars, I'll say Memento, I'll say things like Heat. Ghostbusters, I think for so long has just been, it's a bit of a funny movie, isn't it? But I do think it's absolutely up there in my top 5 favourite films of all time.
Wow.
I
wasn't expecting that. No, it's true. It's got so much legacy, hasn't it? It's a classic film. Everyone knows the soundtrack. Everybody's seen it. Everyone knows it. B.
Okay.
S for me is brilliant. It's like an A, but I could watch it again immediately, or I could watch it again next week, or I could watch it again and again, and it would just be great.
I mean, I literally did that this week.
Exactly. I
watched it twice back to back.
I watched it a couple of weeks ago when we were going to do this podcast originally and couldn't, and then I quickly skimmed through it again tonight, and it was a bit draggy having to skim through it. It's like, it didn't keep me. I didn't want to watch the funny bits again because I'd sort of remember them, and I feel a bit bad, but I kind of was just like a little bit bored in places.
Oh,
okay. I was.
We're all being honest here.
We are. We're being honest, and it's a classic
thing about this
film.
podcast is neither of us is trying to be cool. We're not trying to say we like films for the sake of, this would be cool if I say this is a great movie. We're just being honest. I didn't like Blade Runner, and you're not loving Ghostbusters.
No, it's a great film, and I have the best memories of watching it. As a kid at boarding school, I had the toys. I wanted to be a Ghostbuster. I used to dress up and pretend I was one. I like it now. I like the soundtrack. It's a feel-good movie. I kind of get a little bit bored watching it.
Fair, honest opinion. Right, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a movie from 1986. And AJ is going to give us a clue.
Am I now? I'm trying to write it down.
If only I'd shared the show notes with you before we actually started recording.
Right, well, you know what old Jack Burton says at a time like this, it's all in the reflexes.
Yeah, is that one of your favourite quotes in the movie?
I don't know what fucking movie it is.
We did talk about it several times. I mean, we've changed our mind several times, but that's
the trouble.
What it is.
Is it The Last Starfighter?
Yes.
It is like The Last Starfighter. It is.
It's not Last Starfighter, no.
Is it not?
Right.
Oh, no,
before we get ourselves in.
It's Big Trouble.
We're not saying what it is. What are you doing? We're meant to be teasing it.
Fuck's sake.
I'm not cutting out.
God.
If you want to listen to more things about Ghostbusters, I'll be doing our fast forward episodes in between these rewind episodes, where I follow up on the main show to look at what happened after these iconic movies came out. They might be sequels, prequels, or sometimes just other connective tissue of those involved. So that's out next week. You can do this bit if you want.
Oh, Okay.
Because I just said a lot of words.
All right, you people just sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back in 2 weeks, call the president.
That's also from the movie we're doing next week.
Yeah, it is.
2 weeks.
You should have put that earlier and I would have got it immediately. But, there you go.
Say goodbye, AJ.
Love you all. Bye.
Goodbye.